Hi guys, this is JP here from the Dublin Academy, and I'm here today for junior cycle English students just to show you what I feel is probably the most beneficial thing that you can learn for junior cycle English, and it's going to help you with every facet, every part of the junior cycle English course. Okay, so it's only going to take a short amount of time, so let's get busy. So behind me on the board here, obviously I have my title there, Junior Cycle English, and yes, my overall topic for today is paragraphing! Exclamation mark. That, great emotion coming out there. Everything we write in English needs to be paragraphed, because if it's not, you're going to get a bad mark. Let's put it as simple as that, okay? Writing without paragraphing shows poor structure and is confusing, and an examiner straight away, when they see unparagraphed material, they're just like, oh, I'm already thinking bad mark here before I read a word. So paragraphing is just going to benefit everything, and all the sections, as you see on the board here, it doesn't matter what you're doing. I'm not focusing on a section of the course today, but just to show you what the sections of the Junior Cycle English course are: poetry, fiction, drama, comprehension, film, short story. All of those answers that you will have to do in June in the exam, you're going to need to paragraph your work for. Like I say, if you don't paragraph it, the examiner is against you from the get-go. So you want the examiner on your side. So that's why my simple topic for today that we can tap into every facet of the course with is paragraphing. I know. Try to control your excitement. Okay, so look, let's move over to the board over here on the left, and we'll just look at a couple of concepts before we look at a sample paragraph. Okay, so just two simple things today. I'm going to go through a very small bit of theory, and it's very simple, and you might be looking at it going, I already know this. Hopefully I can add a bit of information to it just to make it that bit sharper for you, and then we'll look at an actual sample from an answer. Okay, right, so look, the way I'm breaking down my paragraphing is PQEC, right? I know in schools we use PQE, which is great, and that's basically what I'm doing today. Sometimes teachers might say PIE, sometimes you might have heard of PEE, and they all pretty much stand for the same thing, just slightly different words. Point, make your point. Q, give a quotation to back up your point, and E is explain. And look, these ones are sort of something similar. I don't use them myself, but point, inference, explain, point, example, explain. Whatever way it is, it's a little structure to build a paragraph with. Okay, and what I'm going to do, until I grab a duster here, and what I'm going to basically do is PQEC. So I'm just going to throw in an extra letter and explain this briefly over here on this side of the board before we go into this. So P, we're talking about how to build a paragraph. The first thing you should have in your paragraph is a point, is your topic sentence. You're basically saying to the examiner and to whoever's reading your material what the topic, the idea is for your paragraph. So for example, today you're talking about Romeo and Juliet, and you're arguing that you're answering a question about the theme. What is the main theme of the text? Your point might be, the main theme of this text is love, full stop. Everything you do in that paragraph then has to feed back into the point that you've made at the start, and that will demonstrate good structure. One point, one idea, and then everything else in the paragraph feeds into that point and idea. So if I say the main theme of this text is love, or this poem is love, or this whatever is love, well then my quote needs to back up that idea. My explanation needs to show the relevance of the quotation I've used and feed into the point as well. And then I need to, C is just the extra bit that I've added to PQE. C means conclude. Conclude, bring it all back to the start, to the question again, to what you said, at the start of your paragraph again. So point, quote, explain, conclude, and you mush all that together, and you should get a sort of anywhere between 6 and 12 lines of a paragraph, okay? And I think at junior cycle, I'm saying 6 to 12 lines of a paragraph. We really won't have time in junior cycle to write massive paragraphs, okay? So they will be on the shorter side of things. Right, so point, quote, explain, conclude, and that's what I'm talking about there. Okay, so look, for today's short session that we're doing here, I'm just going to take this question here. It's about drama. Everyone has to study a Shakespearean play. I'm presuming 99% of us are doing Romeo and Juliet. I know a few other adventurous people are going out into the world of Much Ado About Nothing and stuff like that. Fair play to you. It will all make sense, just maybe talking about the characters from a different place. So look, here's my question. Discuss one strong theme in a play you studied, okay? 5 marks. I'm just keeping it really short and really simple for today. Probably if that was the exam, it might be 20 marks, but we'll leave it at 5 for today. Just one paragraph is all we're after. Strong theme, there's our key word, key phrase. Just make sure whatever the question is that you make sure you connect with the key words and use it in your paragraph. Okay, quick bit of planning here just for purposes of today's class. My point then, I'm going to talk about, like I just said there, I'm going to talk about the play Romeo and Juliet. Right, okay, that's my text that we are going to look at today. So in Romeo and Juliet, there are a few things knocking around, but I'm going to go for the theme of love/romance. I'm going to argue that that's one strong theme in the play. It says one strong theme. There could be lots of other ones, which there are. The quote I'm going to go for today is Romeo says it himself, right? I'll just put Romeo in brackets here because he's the one who says this quote. So Romeo says about Juliet, who he is besotted with, who he absolutely adores, "It is the east and Juliet is the sun." That's the type of line we all love to have written about us, maybe at Valentine's Day, by a secret admirer. Right, so that's the line we're going for. That's a quote from the play Romeo Says It, so I'm giving you the quote. Explain. I just have the word metaphor there, right? Because in this quote, it's nice to be able to pick out if there's a language technique maybe used, or if there's a powerful word used, something to get your teeth into. Juliet is the sun. Some people could actually be offended by that. Are you saying I'm as big as the sun? But hopefully you get the fact that it's a beautiful star in the sky that's burning brightly. So he's comparing her to something beautiful and something awesome. All right, so it is the east and Juliet is the sun. Juliet is not actually the sun, it's a metaphor, right? When we say something is something, it is not, okay? JP is a pig, right? Because he's terrible table manners. We know he's not a pig, he just has bad manners, right? So when we say something is something it's not, that is called metaphor. And Romeo is saying Juliet is the sun. He's just trying to compare. Metaphors are comparisons. Comparisons for sort of exaggeration maybe, or to highlight a point, to really hammer a point home. So he's comparing her with the beautiful star in the sky that we know as the sun. Okay, so I'm going to try and build a paragraph around this information. And I'm going to try and use the procedures here on the board. Point, quote, explain, conclude. Okay, so we might just move over to another board to do that. And like you see in all good cookery programs, here's one I did earlier, right? I used to hate that. Anyway, because I could never get my cake to be as good as the one on TV. Right, here's my paragraph. The structure that we talked about earlier on. Point, quote, explain, conclude. I just popped this up in the corner here. That's what we're trying to show here. And what we're trying to demonstrate is this structure can be used in pretty much every question on junior cycle, except if it's a creative writing question, okay? Except if you're, asked to write maybe the opening of a short story or something like that. So that's creative mode. But 90% of the questions in junior cycle are sort of this academic style of structure. And Leaving Cert, by the way, 2/3 of the questions, this academic structure. So when you're answering about a text, this is what you're going to do, okay? So we'll just label them for the sake of class today. You'd never do this in the exam, but just for demonstration purposes. So here is my point. And my point should be very clear, right? It should be just one short sentence, and the rest of the paragraph should try and prove that my point is correct. So, one strong theme, that's my key word from the question, so I need to connect with that in my very first line. One strong theme that Shakespeare explores in Romeo and Juliet. Just note, guys, for texts, let's use capital letters and let's use speech marks as well for any text, right? And don't use the plus sign like I used over there for notes purposes. Write the word down, right? So one strong theme that Shakespeare explores in Romeo and Juliet is love. Very clear. That point, right? That part of the paragraph should be very clear. Don't go on for 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 lines. Straight to the point, right? Give us a nice clear idea for the rest of your paragraph. For the rest of my paragraph then, I need to try and prove my the point I've made at the start. I've got to prove then with the examples and the evidence that I give here that this is true. That's what you're trying to do. It's like an argument you're making, okay? And so that's my point. Keep it short, keep it simple, to the point, sorry. Q for quote. Right, so here's my quote here then, my first quote, my only quote. It is the east and Juliet is the sun. So that's the quote I said we're going to use. That's fine. Once you learn your quote off, then it's very easy to pop it in. But yeah, it's the hard part is going and learning quotes off for texts like these. So drop the quote in. It's relevant to love because it's Romeo being romantic, right, about Juliet. And then my explanation, I'll just put an E here for an explanation. The titular character, be careful with that word, right? It just means the character that the play is named after. It's kind of half and half, isn't it? Romeo and Juliet, right? So the titular characters, that's Romeo and Juliet. Adoration, love. We're trying to throw in a few fancy words here with adoration and titular. So the titular characters' adoration for one another is a clear theme in this tragedy. I've said love already, so I'm using adoration, and it's clear I'm talking about love in that sentence. So that's a nice explanation so far. Let's go again. Let's give a second idea. Romeo uses a clever metaphor. Nice to see that you've spotted the metaphor. Comparing Juliet to the majestic sun. Don't just say it's a clever metaphor and then leave the word. What does the metaphor do? It compares Juliet to the sun, comma, to demonstrate his love. There we are, back to the start again, for Capulet's daughter. Don't want to say Juliet again, so throwing in Capulet's daughter. So that's P, Q, E, and now we just need to conclude. Let's bring it back to the start again. This powerful image highlights Shakespeare's theme. It's kind of a throwaway line, but it just brings everything back to the start, shows nice structure. Okay, so we've got our P, Q, E, C. And guys, like if we kind of, if you want to take like a screenshot of that, feel free, but we can go back to the middle board again, and we're coming back to this idea here, that these types of paragraphs will work for pretty much every section on this exam paper, right? You're going to be asked about, the poems that you've studied, the novels that you've studied, the plays that you've studied. You'll be given random reading comprehensions. You may be asked about the film, but hasn't come up yet, maybe this year. Short story maybe that you studied or that's in the actual exam paper. So when you're analysing somebody else's writing, which is pretty much 90% of this exam, analysing somebody else's writing, right, literature, that structure is a win-win, okay? And we'll write you a really good paragraph every time. You just got to practice it a bit and then get quick at doing it, because this exam, you're up against the clock, right? So yeah, that's our little session today. It's just about good paragraphing, the fact you can use it in all parts of the paper, except for those creative questions. And thanks a million for your time, and I might see you again soon.